Hey folks, we're going to give a real quick kind of minimalist overview of what the Arcane Mage is bringing to the PvP space. Arcane is a spec I feel like always kind of ebbs and flows depending on how the developers have a different perspective here. We're going to jump into what talents to go with, what talents to avoid for sure, and we'll touch on more. So from a talent perspective, we're going with 1, 2, 3, 1, 1, 2, 1. So what you'll see, tier 1 amplification is just a staple. Basically, when you're clear casting, arcane missiles fire 2 additional missiles. Can't beat that. And then once we start getting into our PvP talents, you'll see why. Shimmer is still a pretty solid go-to here. It's not as much of a lock as we've seen with Fire or Frost, just because Master of Time just gives you a little bit of a benefit there, and it effectively alt resetting the cooldown of Blink um, means that you can kind of game your opponents a little bit depending on what kind of classes you're up against. As far as tier 3, you've got your two choices. Rune of Power is how I prefer to roll, but Incanter's Flow can work here quite well. Like it's effectively a coin flip, whatever you prefer. I'm not super mobile, so I can usually live with setting up for a couple seconds and just dropping that Rune of Power and hopefully loading up the opponent. Tier 4, Resonance just takes the cake. Arcane Barrage dealing 15% increased damage per target it hits is can't be beaten with the other two talents on this row. Chrono Shift is an absolute fixture as far as tier 5 goes. Basically being able to slow your enemies by 50% and then increasing your own movement speed is absolutely fantastic for a spec with kind of clunky mobility is the better way I'd say it. We can avoid, but we can't do it from an infinite perspective if we get targeted. Tier 6 Arcane Orb is the absolute go-to here. Basically launches the Arcane Orb forward from your position, traveling 40 yards. Kind of reminds you of the Frost build if you're familiar with that. And it basically grants you 1 Arcane Charge when it's cast and every time it deals damage. So a ton of fun there. Finally, tier 7, we're actually seeing a bit of a coin flip between these two talents. Overpowered, basically increasing your damage and reducing your mana costs, is a real easy choice. Additionally, Enlightened is a pretty fun play as well. So arcane damage above 70%. Mana is increased by 8%. Mana regen while below 70% is increased by 20%. So for kind of like the min-max build that we have, or one that becomes starved of mana, like this is, can be a little bit fun depending on how you want to play it. There's only real 3 key PvP talents that I'm going to recommend. One is Mass Invisibility, basically allowing you to not only make yourself invisible, but also your allies instantly for 5 seconds. Really fun if you're into any kind of capture the flag or battleground type environment, and you can be a little sneaky as well in arena if you want to bring your arcane to that. Arcane Empowerment, clear casting now stacks 2 additional times and increases the damage of arcane missiles by 5% per stack. So that's kind of where you see it tie into that amplification talent choice. And then finally, Temporal Shield. This is the one where you have to be a little bit more creative. It envelopes you in a temporal shield for 4 seconds. 100% of all the damage you take while shielded gets restored when the shield ends. So basically, it's like a bit of a deferral. If you're like trying to stay alive for a couple extra seconds, it's an easy way to either allow your healer to help you out and set them up for success, or at least defer or delay your ice block if you're cutting it close there. Master of Escape gets a little bit of play, but that's really just reducing the cooldown of your greater invisibility. Torment the Weak gets a little bit of play, but it just really increases the range of your slow and impacts a couple additional targets, so nothing crazy there. What I really like about mages overall from a Covenant perspective is that Nightflay is pretty viable across all 3 specs. There's nothing worse than trying to pick the right spec and having it completely different, especially against a class that only has 3 different DPS groups. So Nightflay is the most popular of all the classes right now. Venthyr also gets some play as Arcane. It doesn't get as much in the frost or the fire specs. So something to consider there if you're preferential to one and you're looking from a min-max perspective. As far as legendaries go, the Triune Ward is kind of the go-to for both frost and fire. It's still good, like it's still adequate. It's used by about a third of all the players in PvP, but the most popular is actually Arcane Bombardment for Arcane Mages. And Arcane Barrage deals an additional 130% damage against targets below 35% health. So it's basically giving you a bit of an execute there and a pretty broad range of one. So, ton of fun to be had there. Definitely take some time to check it out. Finally, we'll call it the third or other alternative legendary that we're seeing some play with so far this season is just Arcane Harmony. And each time an Arcane Missile hits an enemy, the damage of your next Arcane Barrage is increased by 8%. And that stacks up to 18 times. So that can be pretty darn powerful if you can picture how that's going to set you up. You just need to not get super squishy in between all of those connections. So that's the quick and dirty minimalist approach to Arcane. Really fun builds. I really wasn't enjoying it much in Shadowland or in Battle for Azeroth. Enjoying it a lot more now that we're into Shadowlands. Out of my two mages that I have, one of them I'm exclusively playing as Arcane, and it's not too bad at all. So definitely worth checking out. Thanks for taking some time to watch the vid to this point, and if you've made it this far, punch the subscribe button and help me out. Thanks for watching, folks. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.